Drivers, to your cars.
Drivers, start your engines!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you here to the high banks of Atlanta Motor Speedway as it plays host to race number 9 of season 52 of the RTR Aero 88 series. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Jessica Shelton and Zach Fremount. And Jess, I'm going to start with you. These drivers here tonight gearing up for what's going to be an interesting race just based on the fact it's the old surface of Atlanta, but they do have options when they go into the corners.
Absolutely, we've seen a lot of the drivers are in happy hour run the bottom, middle groove, and some of them way up on the high side. But it's basically all about tire wear tonight. It's going to be really hard to manage the tire wear when you're getting so in depth and involved in this race, Seth.
Zach, obviously here tonight as well, a special event as it's the Ed Bauman Memorial Race for these drivers here in the Aero 88 series.
Absolutely. Ed Bauman, brother to RTR RTG founder Terry Bauman. We celebrate him tonight. He started back with Leadfoot at the beginning of RTR when everything first started out in its infancy. Seth, I've been with them since 2005, knew Ed a really long time, and it's great to see a race in his honor as we come down and get the green flag. They'll head off into turn number 1.
Green flag in the air. It's going to be a long one for these drivers here tonight. 130 laps of racing, and we were told that the tires, they're going to be screaming before we even get to lap 20.
Absolutely. We're going to see about probably 15 to 16 laps before those tires start to fall off, so we're going to see nothing but tire conservation this whole race. But it seems like some of these drivers, like, for example, Brian Wolf, who has been on a tear lately trying to get up at the top of the RTR Challenger Series, he's starting to make his way and his presence known, so he'll be one to watch tonight pretty much for sure. Robert Balcom, after having a mishap with a penalty recently as well, he's on the way coming back, trying to get some redemption as well, Seth.
It's the midway portion of the season really here too, Zach. So if anybody's going to make a run for that championship that Balcom currently holds, they're going to have to make their move sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. You know, these guys can't wait around too much on points. It is closing down on the points of the regular season, and Robert Balcom is not one that you can overlook, especially when it comes to these sort of intermediate racetracks. Balcom, a really fast, stout competitor at just about any circuit that he goes to, and if guys want to make up some points on him, they're going to have to really put the work in because he's not going to make it easy on them.
And battle we got right now for the lead. I mean, you got Chris Emery, our Dover winner. He has been committed since the green flag to actually run that top side, and he has not let Supka clear him for the race lead yet.
I wanted to point out there is a car on paper. I think it's John Godfrey in the 711. I'm not sure what happened, but there is a little bit of smoke up here on the front stretch from Andre Rayum in the 63 machine.
Looks as though at this point it will be Zupta around to the lead. Chris Emery giving up just a little bit through that first corner. He will settle down second in line in front of Chuck McClure and Chris Elliott behind him.
I gotta wonder here because, you know, we know that right front's the tire that's really going to take the most heat and is going to wear down the quickest. We just saw Emery running that second groove, and I have to wonder, is that going to alleviate the pressure that right front would feel? Obviously, you're not having to turn the wheel as much, or is there not enough grip up there that actually is going to wear the tires down quicker?
I think it really depends on your corner entry, because I think that you can use that middle groove to your advantage. I don't know how much ground you'll be able to make around there by yourself, but you can run it out there. Now, whether or not you'll be saving a little bit by not turning the car as much, you will have to be in the accelerator that much more to make up for the time that those cars on the bottom side are making. So I think it's a little bit of give and take, Seth, if we're going to be completely honest about it. But as you see right now, everybody really pretty much settled down. The first 2x2 that we see is going to be about the midpoint of the pack, but top 5 now running pretty steady, gapping themselves from that 6th place car off 4.
Zach, I want to bring up a point. You were talking about like losing a lot of time regarding like trying to take care of your tires, but now if we go into a long green flag run and pit stops occur, what is your sense of urgency to push your car and use up your tires to get somewhere?
Well, when you come off that pit road, you really feel like Superman. You've got a good run. Now, you got to remember, over the course of a green flag run, if you make it to the first round of green flag pit stops, especially on Atlanta, with the coarse surface that the track has, your car's sliding all over the place, you use up those right side tires quite a bit. Now, probably the right front a bit more than what you would the right rear. If you can wear those a little bit more easily or evenly, it can give you a little bit more of an advantage as you can, slide that rear end of the car out just a little bit. But initially off that pit road, you've got probably 15 miles an hour faster into the corners than what you have at the end of a run. So you really kind of have to draw it back just a little bit and try to temper yourself a little bit so you don't eat that right front up too quick.
I want to focus back. Sorry, go ahead.
When you want to try to push yourself to get into a better position during pit stops itself, I mean, if you want to push it a little bit harder before pit stops to gain some track position, I mean, isn't track position more key at this point in this track? Zach, I'm just wondering how this will play out regarding like positions.
Well, absolutely. Track position into the pits is going to count for a lot. You don't want to make a mistake and, cost yourself a lot of time out on the racetrack, especially if you were to have another green flag run. Cautions can alleviate that obviously a little bit, but these long green runs, you got to maintain as much as you can. So, Seth, it looks like Emery back out to the lead again into turns 1 and 2. Zoopt is going to tuck in behind them. That top 5 checking out from 6th place pretty well here off of turn number 2.
Yeah, right now the top 6 have all gotten themselves relatively single file, and now they're starting to race from Matt Watkins on back. That car you see out of line there, we're going to focus on for a moment, and that is Dante Ricky. Of course, the person that we are having the memorial race for here tonight, Ed Bauman, known for his nickname Ghost, and would run the Ghostbusters machine. Dante Ricky doing the honors here tonight, and we've had the privilege here at Flatout Racing Network to see a number of tribute races and even see some kind of heartwarming Cinderella stories take place. I mean, how cool would it be for Dante Ricky here tonight doing the driving duties of a car that Ed Bauman drove to put that thing maybe in victory lane here tonight at Atlanta?
That would be great indeed. I mean, you and I have called, 3 or 4 races already, Seth, for this year than the last year, and it just seems like every single time something good happens out of these races, and you can't count out Dante because, last season with Dante, he had such great consistency, maybe a win or two, but he had such a great consistent run that he was able to be up there and be a championship contender all season long.
And Zach, I want to cast your memory back to last Thursday. Dante Ricky filling in for Robbie Knights has finished 2nd in that event. So, obviously not a hindrance to get into a car other than his own.
Absolutely, and nobody minds at all, especially to have the honor to run that Ghost number 16. I'll tell you what, Seth and Jess, that brings back a lot of memories going back a long time. Like I said, I joined this league back in around 2005, I believe it was, and, the Aeros being one of the staples of the series at that time, and every livery that Ed Bauman ran, it always had that Slimer on the car somewhere, that trademark Ghostbusters logo that we both know from, the movies and posters of the movies and everything like that. So to see Dante Ricky behind the wheel of that car, we know he's a very capable driver. He's also very good at intermediate tracks, but right now just biding his time if they've got themselves into single file through turns 1 and 2. Seth, I think a little bit of the issue they were having there is when you're running too wide, the way that that pack of cars were through the corners, you scrub off a lot of time because you can't wash it out. You can't apex it as much as you would typically. So these guys now find themselves quite a bit behind that lead pack.
Well, what I'm finding interesting here is that these 4 drivers lined up ahead, that being Matt Watkins, Robert Balcom, Dante Ricky, and Andre Majin. I'm surprised that they actually aren't pulling away from the double file formation behind them with Dave Melson and company. Instead, they kind of looked like they couldn't break away and catch up to that top 6.
You know, I'm really curious to see throughout this run here if those tires up ahead are going to fall off even more, because we see a battle starting to go on up here for, I believe, 3rd position.
It looks like Chris Emery falling his way back to about the 4th position right now. Looks like once again he got himself kind of stuck on that outside line, and the McClure and Elliott machines were able to work underneath him. So just as you mentioned, we'll have to see how much savings these leaders have in comparison to the second pack of cars. But right now, the car that was running in the 5th position, currently still running in the 5th position.
We had some smoke up here. I'm sorry. Oh, Manny D is on the grass down here in 1 and 2. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Zach.
Off the racing surface, no caution has come out for this, so tough break there for Manny D.
Yeah, Manny's still off the pace. As you see him working around the low sides of turn number 1 and 2. Have to take a look back here in the moment and see exactly what happened. No caution on the track at this time. However, his car heavily off the pace working down the back straight.
Well, remember, these drivers have to be very careful, because with them skidding and going sideways, this is a series where you only get a limited amount of tires. You're only allowed to get 4 sets of tires, and anything beyond that is a penalty, a 1-lap penalty. And then you also got the biggest issue of all, Seth, realistic damage.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but we've also crossed the threshold now, that 16 laps that we know that it's when you're really going to start to feel the effects of that right front. And one thing I'm wondering that might have possibly happened with Manny D, Zach, you touched on this pre-race about the unpredictability of off of turn 4, how it seems like that car is going to be perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden you get to the exit of that final corner and the thing just won't turn.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Seth, that doesn't take a whole lot. It takes just being about a half a car width up out of that groove, and as you're getting on that accelerator coming up off that corner, it just really sneaks up on you a lot faster than what you might anticipate. So kind of curious to see if it's something like that. Also curious if potentially maybe a flat tire issue if he skidded that car really far. But Seth, right now, the top 4 continue to break away. 5th place, Josh Metallic, he is falling farther and farther back towards that second group of cars, who also doesn't appear to be making any time on these leaders right now.
And in that second group of cars right now, you've got the top 2 in the point standings, both nose to tail, Robert Balcom and Dante Ricky, 28 points, separating those 2 coming into this race. And I almost wonder, if we're looking at possibly the first round of green flag pit stops, if you're Dante Ricky, is this a cat and mouse game right now, trying to figure out what Robert Balcom's strategy is for the long run?
Well, we ran last night, Tuesday night, we ran the Winston Cup 98 cars at the same exact track. Now, I don't believe the setup is the same. However, you do reach at some point a point of diminishing returns on these tires. Once you get about halfway through this run, as we've heard, those tires fall off quite a bit. The times fall off quite a bit. And it's also a lot harder to make a move on guys, because we see the parity of these fixed setups. But what that does is when everybody gets slowed down, unless you've saved your equipment tremendously, you're all slowing down at that same pace as well. So it's all about trying to get and maintain a run. And right now, these guys just kind of cruising around on the, wow, just 2 cars well off the pace on the back straightaway.
Caution is not out yet, which is really... Manny D's still on the apron trying to get back up on the track, I'm guessing. Yeah, he's able to get back on track just fine. Zach, I have to bring up something to your attention, okay? If you are, say for example, Jack Dassault, Andre Charist, or Brian Wolf, maybe even Bob Dixon, okay? You're focused on the Challenger Series. Are you more focused on the Challenger side of the aspect, or are you still wanting to go in all out overall and trying to beat people like Robert Balcom, Dante Ricky, Jeremy Jeffries, who are got the top 3 spots right now in the overall standings?
Well, I mean, obviously, as a driver, as a racer, you want to go out and win every race. I don't think anybody goes out to start a race without the expectation of winning. Now, there might be some tracks you struggle at, some you don't do as well as others. But when you find yourself in a position like, say, Jack Dassault is right now, he is currently back in that 27th position, mired far back in the field. So, unless he can make a big recovery right now.
Yellow's out. Sorry.
And it looks like
racked
it's
up
gonna...
here in 3 and 4.
Yeah, I think that is the 27.
27 of Andre Marjan.
That's a lot of back-end damage on that machine, too.
You want to go see what else happened to Manny D in this caution as well?
Well, I think Manny D, what he's been doing is he's been running low, trying to stay out of the way of other drivers after getting some early damage. We'll check and see what happened with this 27 car. But one driver I was actually looking at that started up inside the top 10 guys and had fallen all the way back to 20th was Jeremy Jeffries. So I didn't know what exactly was going on with him. He might be one of those drivers that's very happy to see this caution come out.
Andre Marjan was running 5th at this moment, and going back and looking, it looks like he comes off the corner off of turn 2. Everything looks fine. He gets a huge run on Dante. And he just gets a slight low tap at the back end, it looked like.
That's Dave Melson behind him that got him. And of course, we know that when the run goes further on and the tires start to wear, you have to back your corners up earlier. And a lot of times that can lead to drivers not necessarily being certain of where the let-off point is for a driver ahead of them.
Was that Dante Ricky that he was falling behind? Because I can't really tell with him being a different number right now.
I believe it was.
It was Dante Ricky that Manjong was following behind. It looked like Ricky had to get out of the gas. Manjong not quite expecting Ricky to get off the gas as much as he did. When he cracked the throttle, it looked like the rear end of that car slid up the track just a little bit into the path of the oncoming Melson. And that's when Manjong went up, smacked the wall with that rear end pretty hard. So now, Seth, we know with realistic damage, this is going to hurt Mahjong on a track that is already notorious for being very overwhelmingly, geared toward the handling of one's race car.
Well, the thing I'm wondering here, too, I mean, as you said, you guys raced here last night. I would have to wonder, usually damage to the back end of a car is going to push that spoiler down. It's going to make it looser going into the corner. So I would say that Andre Mahjong, his problems have multiplied. Not only is he going to have to take care of that right front, but if he's loose getting into the entry of these corners now, he's going to have to take care of that right rear as well.
I also want to point out that Josh Metallic and Jeff Supta, they both came off pit road pretty decently. Supta maintaining the top spot, but Metallic grabbing a couple positions to put himself back up in second place at this moment in this restart. Got a couple of drivers staying out right now at the moment. It looks like it's just going to be Robbie Nices, and apparently Jeremy Jeffries is going to go around and lead a lap and get some bonus points for that. But I expect that we should probably see them come into pit next time by. So with this caution coming out, we only got 26 laps under green. What are you thinking, Zach? Well, what type of wrench does this throw into the game plan moving forward now after having a long green flag run like we had?
Well, the first thing that we're going to have to watch out for is this restart, because these cars notoriously loose on this racetrack, especially on the restart. Not just when you're firing off at the line, but also mid to corner exit. You have to be really exceptionally careful of that, considering you are now on fresh old tires and you're not going to quite have that grip that you had before. So as far as fuel strategy, we're not worried about that yet. We're not even a quarter of the way through this race yet. So there's going to be plenty of time for potentially more incidents or some more green flag stops here. So we'll have to see what happens.
So you think they were basically looking at the fact of their tire wear that run, pretty much?
Well, I think if, for a 26, 27 lap run there, now nobody knew that incident was going to take place and bring the caution out, but that was a pretty good test for at least the top 4 competitors that had checked out from the rest of the field at that point to see, hey, how far can we push these cars and still gap the cars behind us? Now, on the other side of that spectrum, you got some guys like Robert Balcom, Dante Ricky in that 16 car that kind of got stuck back there, stuck in that 2-wide action and weren't able to maintain touch with that lead pack. So those guys are going to know now, hey, we got to make sure that we stay with these top 4 or else we're going to lose them real fast.
And Metallic gave up second place on that restart, most likely, that he was going to have behind Supra to come in and top off. And he's going to lose a lot of track position, so he's going to have to navigate and play a perfect strategic game of how much do you push it to get up there now. And honestly, I wouldn't like being back here in traffic trying to save my tires and trying to push it to actually gain some spots at this moment. I mean, I don't know what you would have done in that moment, Zach. I mean, I'm guessing Metallic's going through for you know, fuel mileage, but if it were me, I would have stayed out right there after coming in the first time.
Yeah, not sure exactly what happened there, but he did top off on fuel. Plenty of time to get back toward the front. Seth, we will be taking the green flag back at lap number 29 here. Chance to shake the field back up, bunch everybody back together, so it looks like that Corvette's going to be heading off pit road here pretty quick.
Yeah, we had 4 or 5 cars break away on that first run. Now those drivers that were 6th on back have a shot at the top 5. We'll see how racy they just started to get. We did have a couple of drivers get the free pass. John Godfrey now -1, Manny D -4 as Jeff Supka gets us back underway. So far, he has led 18 of our laps here tonight.
Supta certainly had the dominant looking car so far to this point. However, this is going to bring a couple other contenders. Well, a couple cars real loose off of turn number 2.
I think that might have been the 29.
2 cars in the wall. It looks like Cy Jones in the
Yellows
wall
out
at the tail of the pack, coming off at turn number 2. Another car spinning to the inside of the racetrack. That was a result of that accordion effect that we saw, those 2 cars getting really loose there in turn number 2. Yellow flag lap 30.
Cy Jones and the other one, the 56 of Jeff Crivello. And
Wow.
you see the rear end damage sustained on his family channel machine.
You mentioned it a moment ago, Zach. What we really had to watch was these restarts because of how loose they were and the checking up, trying to be careful not to lose it off these corners. And we just saw what just happened with that.
You know, I hate to say I told you so, but it happened exactly where I called it. It was going to happen in mid to corner exit here on the restart. So what happens is the rear end of that car on those cold tires, it starts feeling really light. And about the time that you got to crack the throttle just a little bit about mid corner, you know, try to get your car back straight aiming off. When you crack that throttle, that breaks that traction just a little bit. And when that happens, that rear end starts to come around. So you've really got to be able to anticipate it. If you don't know what's coming, it'll catch you off guard real quick. And you see what happened there. The 2 cars that did almost lose it, a great job recovering it. However, it looked like Cy Jones, Jeff Crivello caught the brunt of that coming off the exit of turn number 2.
Yeah, Robbie Nice has got a piece of it as well. And to your point, the driver that got out of shape but gathered it back up, was able to drive away, was actually the 8 of Jeremy Jeffries. And really surprised, as mentioned, he started 9th, fell back to 20th prior to that caution, and we saw him struggle there through 1 and 2. This is a guy that went coast to coast last week in taking the checkered flag at Gateway.
Well, if you think that Jeremy Jeffries isn't just biding his time here and now thinking to himself, all right, well, now I've got to patiently pick my way back up, back off through the pack one by one, he will be in contention before the day's over. I think Josh Metallic will as well. These guys right now just sitting at the back. I think they're going to take their time, take a deep breath here, pay attention to what the field's going to do. And if I'm in their heads, if I'm in their positions, I'm thinking, okay, after 1 quick yellow, I wouldn't be surprised if we get another quick yellow. So let's just keep our cars clean and we'll be up there when the day's all done.
You know, I was thinking about something, Zach, and tell me if I'm wrong or right, okay?
Okay. All right. Well, Jessica's still deep lost in thought there. The field working their way around turns number 4. They're starting to double them back up.
Yep, you are.
Okay, I'm sorry, Zach. I don't know what's going on, but it's like my game froze and everything like going into freeze for a moment. But what I was gonna say, Zach, was, you know how you're on the bottom and you're in draft, you're pushing it a little bit with your tire wear, etc., and you're having to let off the gas, you know, and depending on your situation, you might actually have to touch the brake a little bit as well. Wouldn't it be more key to go up a little bit higher and run, not just the middle group, but a little bit higher up and half throttle it a little bit better around there? Wouldn't that save a little bit of tire and gain you a little bit more of an advantage of a runoff?
I mean, potentially, but not really, especially on the restarts, because you don't really know what the cars are going to do around you, how they're going to react. And you also don't want to be put into the position where you're now a little bit higher up than what you normally would have been. And you find yourself stuck behind a 3 wide situation or something like that coming off the corner as well. So it can be kind of a double-edged sword. It could be a consideration if you're a little bit desperate later in the race, but I don't think it's necessarily the thing to do quite, 33 laps into the run.
I see. I was just wondering about testing the waters a little bit. What if you would try to test it, so you could think about having that as something to use later on in the race.
I mean, it's definitely a consideration. If you're going to test, early is the time to do so. So you could do that as well. Seth, what are you seeing up there at the front of the pack?
Yeah, right now we've got our top 5 kind of shuffled up now with drivers that were running in the first half of the top 10 and the second half of the top 10. Supka's still leading, but Matt Watkins has now moved his way up to second. Dante Ricky right there in third, Chuck McClure in fourth, and Robert Balcom in fifth. And the one thing I'm also wondering here too, we talked about the fact if you're going to get into the championship hunt, now is the time, because after tonight we've only got 6 more races remaining. In the case though of the battle we're seeing currently on track going on between Robert Balcom and Dante Ricky, are those two just focused on each other right now, or are they focused on the fact I got to get max points, so I got to win this race regardless of where my other competitor finishes?
Well, I think they want to try to get into it just a little bit more. Let's make sure that we finish the race before we figure out who's going to be finishing in front of who. But we know that these two competitors, toward the end of the day, as the laps wind down, will most certainly be keeping track of where the other is out on the racetrack. So I don't think either one of those guys wanting to sacrifice any points to the other. So it'll be definitely an interesting race to watch toward the end.
I think they're just focused mainly on where they're at this moment, not even worried about points or anything. I was just trying to survive into that last bit of a run that they need, like last 20, last 30 laps.
Well, John Godfrey ran into some early issues, fell 2 laps down, and these 2 quick yellows have put him back on the lead lap. So we'll see if the 7-Eleven can make some forward progress. Manny D picked up another lap as well, now -3, as Jeff Supka going to bring us back down to the green flag. We'll see if these drivers going to be a little bit more careful on these Kohler tires as the green flag flies once again at Atlanta. We are starting to close in on a third of the way through this race.
And if you think about it, this is the start of lap 36, I believe, 36, 37. And if you think about it, this is roughly around the time they would have been able to stretch it to the pit road. So anyone who only pit that one time may actually have their self been cycled again. But I'm more concerned about Jeremy Jeffries. I don't know if he actually came down pit road that time and got tires or not. And if that's the case and he did, then he's only got 2 more sets to go, and he's got a long way to go.
2 cars got together off of turn 4. We do have trouble in the front straightaway.
Oh my God, it's getting worse up here in the exit of the pit road area.
Dave Melson involved in that one. Looks like that might be the 63 of Andre Rayum.
Richard
Orlando
Martin.
LeBoy.
Demar's sideways on the track.
A couple of drivers slowly making their way through the incident. Obviously, the replay will tell us just exactly who was involved, but I'm almost wondering with where this was, possibly some miscommunication on the restart in the latter half of the field.
Yeah, not exactly sure. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. It looked like they were 3 wide coming off of 4. One car came down across the nose of what I believe was the 51 of Bob LaChance, sending that car back up the track. Richard Martin got into the wall trying to avoid and just blocked up the entire dogleg from that point on.
Here's a look at it out of turn 4. Watch the 43 of Richard Martin. Oh, actually, I think it was contact there between LaChance and Black that kind of stacked everybody else up. Some drivers checked up, some drivers didn't.
See 4, 5, 6 cars taking pretty substantial damage. The 63 car in there, it looked like the 28 may also have gotten a piece of that. Orlando LeBoy in the 42 car, he spun down to the infield grass. So Cautions breeding cautions here, Seth. I can't say as I'm entirely surprised to see it, but I thought we might have gotten a couple laps in there, but off of turn 4, it can be a little bit daunting. You spike that gas pedal just a little bit too hard, that rear end can snap around on you, and that's kind of what it looked like might have happened with the 86 car, as he abruptly came from about the high middle lane down into that bottom lane across the nose of the 51 there. So I'm guessing he probably got a little squirt.
Well, we went the first, 25 laps or so clean and green, and sometimes drivers, they enjoy that, but at the same time, it gets into a little bit of a lull, and they think, come on, we got to go racing here. They all get bunched up for a restart. Then they decide, oh, let's take it double wide, let's take it 3 wide, let's try picking up some positions now, because they realize that if they end up going to another long green flag run, it's going to be a lot more difficult to pick up 1-2 positions as quickly as it would be if you were able to maybe kill 2 birds with 1 stone in 1 corner.
Well, you also saw what happened at the start of the race, where there was a good portion of the pack that
someone's
because they
blown up.
were racing 2 wide, yes, 1 car smoking off 2, but at the start of that race, we saw what happened, Seth, is there were cars racing 2-3 wide, and because of that, that allowed those leaders to check up. So now the cars at the middle portion back of this pack have taken notice of that. Hey, we have to make sure that we get past cars and get past them quick, because if those guys out ahead of us get single file, they're going to be gone, and we're not going to have a chance.
Manny D710 is blowing his engine, it looks like. Or at least maybe a header problem on the machine. Zach, on these restarts, do you think they're in first gear? I mean, I'm pretty sure Supta would probably be in first gear since he's starting up near the front. But what about the front group, like the first 5-6 cars? Do you think they're all in first gear going through this, or not? Like how we do on the Super Speedway series, or do you think they're just relaxing in second gear all the way back?
Well, it's really driver preference there, Jess. Now, the thing that you're going to run into if you start or restart in that first gear, you have a higher chance of getting that wheel spin. Now, if it's later on into a run and cars are on older tires, that's really bad, because that back end can snap around on you really quick and cause a real big mess like the one that we just saw on the front straightaway there. So I think if you're maybe Jeff Supta, if you're the leader of the race or whoever's restarting on the outside of the front row, you can take that chance and try to start in that first gear. But if you're a little bit farther back in the pack, maybe not such a good idea.
Yeah, I'm always wondering if it was a gear issue that actually started that whole, jam pack, coming in first gear, that middle way back or something. I was just curious if that's what probably caused it.
Nah, I wouldn't think that's what that was off of turn 4. They had made it too far around the track at that point. Seth, we have seen now multiple cars coming down pit road. Again, we see a second group. It's got me kind of curious if guys are starting to think about topping off that gas tank. I still think it's a little bit too early, but do you really want to put yourself in a position where you lose all that track position?
Well, a lot of these drivers that are coming down, they haven't really had the track position. I think that the last lap around, the first driver to hit pit road was Andre Charest, and he's spent most of this race just outside of the top 15. I think maybe what some of these guys are thinking is they're calculating this race from back to front, like a lot of our fuel mileage races are done. And they're thinking, this is what I need to do to be able to battle with some of these front runners up here, like a Supka, like a McClure, Watkins, Dante, Ricky, Robert Balcom, giving them an opportunity to maybe pull out a bit of a miracle, a fuel mileage miracle here at Atlanta. But the one thing I got to ask you guys here is Jeff Supka out in front for 29 of these 39 laps. He was able to hold off an early challenge from Chris Emery and then was able to hold on to the top position until that first caution. Now he's been able to run some of these laps under pacing, not have to defend it. But on which side of the coin do you think Jeff Supka is on? Does he like the fact that we're having these short spurts and he's not having to really defend his lead as much, or would he prefer this thing go into a long green flag run?
I mean,
Zach, you want to start off?
I'm going to be completely honest with you here, Seth. I don't mind the yellow flags if I'm Jeff Supta, but if we keep getting quick successive yellow flags like this, it's going to tremendously cool down the tires. Now, the cooler that these tires get, the more slippery they are on these restarts.
Whoa!
Now,
Matt Watkins. I don't know what's going on with the 20, but he just dove to the apron there into turn 1.
Didn't exactly see what happened there either, Seth. That's my mistake.
Was deaccelerating through 1 and 2.
Still well off the pace down the back straightaway. It's oddly reminiscent of what we saw with the 710 car as well.
Yeah, might possibly have missed a shift, may have blown a gear possibly, shifting up from first to second, and amazing that he was able to dive that thing to the apron and not have it spin out, because there's not a whole heck of a lot of grip down on that flat apron through the first and second corners.
Yeah, car hard into the wall off of turn number 2, head on. The 28 is collected as well. A car lost it, went head on into that turn 2 wall down the back straightaway. Hard contact.
I can only assume that car that went head on might have been the 27, because he was smoking there on the back stretch.
While you guys were focused on the wreck, I went back and checked Matt Watkins on that restart. It sounded like he may have blown third gear. It's what it sounded like, maybe third or fourth gear. I heard him shift up, and then right around the third or fourth gear mark, it just started like having that little issue. So he blew one of the gears. I don't know which one, but it's either third or fourth.
There's a look at what happened there with Andre Mahjong off of turn 2, and back to what we were talking about when he received his earlier contact. You just saw that the back end of that car snapped around. I think we can relate that to the earlier rear end damage that he sustained.
Absolutely. That air catches up underneath the rear end of that race car and sucks it around. Not to mention, again, like we were just finishing saying, consecutive quick yellow flags. So really cold tires. You saw the rear end come around. He went down to the right side of the 43 of Martin and then just hard into that outside wall. The 28 car there with nowhere to go. A couple other cars also piling in after the fact with nowhere to go. So that's definitely going to end a couple days right there. Hard hit for the 27 Washington.
Riding on board with the 33 of Tony Fox as he makes an evasive maneuver to avoid, but does make contact with the left side of his machine into that inside wall, so at least avoids further damage, but does get involved in that incident in some way.
So a lot of quick yellow flags. Our last green flag run ended around lap number 26. Ever since then, I don't think we have completed a single lap of green flag, and if we have, it's only been one. Right now, drivers, you can bet they're probably clutching to try to make that fuel last just a little bit longer because they're not running even long enough to really wear these tires at this point.
Now, I'm trying to remember what you guys were suggesting. Seth, you asked a question earlier, and Zach was saying that, how Super probably doesn't mind these short little spurts, with the cautions coming out. Honestly, I think Supta would rather have a long green flag run. Yeah, he might lose the lead. It's highly unbelievable at this point that he would lose the lead based on what he did earlier in the 27, 25 laps that we ran. But I honestly think Supta would rather have a green flag run, so maybe him, Dante, Chuck, Chris, Robert break away like they did earlier on and try to get a little bit of distance from the rest of the field before coming back down the pit road. That would definitely save a little bit more for them, I would imagine, in the long run.
Dupka's kind of had an up and down season. He's made all but one start this year, but he has had 2 or 3 finishes outside of the top 20. That's why he finds himself 10th in the point standings. We're used to seeing him running up at the front. Supka also a former winner this season, a couple of weeks ago at Rockingham, and then 2 weeks before that at the road course of Watkins Glen. So he's chasing his 3rd win of the season. And so far, he's led 34 of these laps. We do actually have some retirees out of the race as well as we are closing in to the finish of the first third of this race. Andre Mahjong, second incident he's been involved in tonight. That car damaged and now behind the wall, 28th. Mark Paglia, who was caught up in that as well, will finish 29th. Matt Watkins, officially, it looks like it was an engine gearbox that has put him behind the wall to finish in 30th. He was running second at the time his issue occurred. And Manny D has also gone to the garage area in the 31st position. And Zach, it just seems like the longer we go on here, if we continue to have these restart mishaps, the garage area is going to have more and more drivers frequenting it.
Well, I think what we're going to end up seeing here, if we keep having these restart mishaps, the more restart mishaps we have, the better chance that we have of getting a green flag run toward the end of the race, because there's only going to be so many cars left out on the field. Right now, pace car lights are out. Jeff Supta, still our leader, as he has been the majority of this race. Look who is on that outside of that front row, though. That 16 Ghostbusters Chevy being piloted by Dante Ricky in tonight's Ed Bauman Memorial Race. Cool to see Dante get that car up there. And Seth, I don't think it's really any surprise, as we expected to see him up here at some point anyway.
No, absolutely. No doubt about that. Of course, it would be awesome to see that familiar number 16 driven by Ed Bauman to be able to go to victory lane with Dante Ricky behind the wheel. For those that just joined us here tonight, not only is this a race in the Aero 88 schedule, but it is a tribute race as well. Ed Bauman, of course, the brother of Terry Bauman, who we're used to seeing run in the RTG Enter 2003 as well as iRacing series, having this tribute race here for his brother. Ed, a longtime haul trucker and sim racer as well, a multi-time race and champion winner in RTR, a league that was formed by the Bauman brothers, Terry, Tom, as well as Ed.
Yeah, Ed was a staple of this league, as one of those brothers, one of those faces that we would see and talk to every week. And he is greatly, greatly missed. Tonight's race in his name. Green flag out, lap number 45. Supta with a pretty good restart, but it looked like Dante Ricky, he got a pretty good run on the high side as well.
Yep, side by side as I go back into turn 1, but it looks like Supta's got the advantage, like he's had all race long, pulling away very, very gently, very gingerly, not really pushing it too hard or anything. Dante's going to cycle right in second, nice and snug, single file with those top two. Battles for third right now as they go off of 3 and 4.
You see Balcom working under the 222 of Emery down the front straightaway. Interesting to see if the bottom line can get something working or if it's going to be that middle line coming in. Right now, it looks like Emery and Rivard with no help on the inside as everybody's going to work their way back down to the bottom. Supta with about a 5 car. Oh, trouble off at turn 2.
That's Ron Lucet and Josh Metallic I saw there at the back end of the screen. There may be others as everyone scatters on the back straightaway.
3, 4, maybe 5
Andre
cars
Cheris,
involved.
the 75, was involved in that as well.
Don Godfrey, the 711.
And it looks like that number 39 car is done. Window net down. Josh Metallic taking the wheel off of that car.
And I want to go back to when we were questioning Josh Metallic coming down pit road. A few cautions ago, he would have restarted up in second, but then he came down pit lane to top off the fuel tank, put himself back in traffic, and we see all too often drivers that have strong race cars up inside the top 5 trying to go outside the box,
real
getting
quick,
caught up and stuff like that.
I just got information from Dante Ricky, an admin of the series, that this will be the last double file restart that they have. So what do you think about that one, Zach, going forward, and that now they're going to go single file? I think this might be the last double file, then every single one will be single. Maybe this will be the single one that starts, but with Dante saying going towards single file racing, maybe after this last restart here that we're going to have in a couple laps, I mean, what are you thinking? Is that actually playing like into Supta's favor on that, you think?
I don't know exactly how that plays into Supta's favor. However, we do know those single file starts, it will spread the field out just a little bit as they won't be so tightly bunched. Now, I question whether or not that's going to do anything to prevent a yellow, as we've seen these last couple cautions that we have had have not exactly been a result of cars restarting double files so much as it's been a result of cars losing control of their race cars on the restarts. I'm not exactly sure that single file is going to help that condition out. Seth, what do we got for a replay right now?
Yeah, right now as we see it there, it was the 62 of Ronald Lucet getting out of shape. Just as you said there, Zach, it's not car versus car, it's car versus track. And the track seems to be winning on every exchange. It was hard to tell what went on with the 39 of Metallic. One of two things would have occurred with him as his car went dead right up into the wall. Either he saw that the 62 was spinning and he just turned the wheel hard right to try and avoid if the 62 came back up the track. Either that or he got hard on the brakes, and that with the brakes locking up, that car would not turn, but then he bounces off the wall, gets Andre Charest, and then John Godfrey comes in and gets into the spun out 62. So at least 4 drivers sustaining damage in this one, and it does take Josh Metallic officially out of this race.
As you mentioned, Seth, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it was some sort of a brake or tire lockup that caused that incident. As we have been already talking about and we've documented already, these cars on exceptionally cold tires right now because they haven't run any laps under green. So with the tires being as cold as they are, there's no grip. You go to get on the brakes hard to try to avoid an incident, and next thing you know, you're just sliding with no control of your car whatsoever. So tough break for the 39.
And the thing that I noticed there as well in the case of Ronald Lucet was he wasn't battling side by side with anybody. He was pretty much by himself, single file, had the option of whatever lane he wanted into 1 and 2. So I have to wonder, for a number of these drivers that we're seeing struggle with the car stepping out on them, is there any kind of an adjustment that you can make to avoid that car from snapping out?
Well, unfortunately, they're in a very catch-22 position right now because there are limited tire stops in this series. So you can't just duck down onto pit road to try to get some warm tires to try to guarantee yourself a little bit more grip out on the racetrack. The more yellow flag laps we have, the colder your tires are going to get, and you have to be able to get around the track. Now, quite personally, and this is strictly in my own opinion, I don't know, as I mentioned before, that going to single file restarts is going to alleviate the issue that we're seeing right now. But maybe the idea and thought process of admins is maybe they can get the field to spread out just a little bit more so guys can take their times and drive it in just a little bit easier. That might be the train of thought on this as the yellow lights are out on top of the pace car.
And to clarify, it was officially, I double checked with Dante. This right here will be the last green flag restart we have double file, yes. I do want to point out that we've got some people here in the top 10 that we should be focused on. If we can get a nice green run going, I mean, I'm looking at that 29 of Brian Wolf. He's been right there in the top 10, chomping at the bit. He's really trying to, he's only 17 points back of Jack Basalt. Jack's not having a really good race. Andre, we just saw him get involved a little earlier in this last caution as well. I mean, Brian's in prime position to capitalize on a lot of misfortune at this moment if this race continues as it is.
Another driver I'd keep an eye on here too would be that 35 of Frank Rivard. He's maybe been one of the most aggressive on the restarts, has been very quickly moving his way through the field, and he's had a very consistent year, 5th in the point standings.
Yeah, Rivard running really well on these intermediate tracks. Not surprised to see him running up in the top 10 right now either. And the key is there is a lot of position to be gained as long as you can maintain control of your car on the restart. If you can maintain control of your car, not get too loose, and capitalize when other cars behind you are having to let off a little bit more, that's where you make up all these positions. So right now, off of turn number 2, things looking still pretty clean and green. Zipto now off to the lead down into turn number 3. Dante, Ricky, your first side-by-side between McClure and Balcom in turns 3 and 4.
Smooth and clean all the way back here in the back with Bob Dixon right now. Going off with 4. Everything seems to be good. It looks like we will finish 1 green flag lap, and hopefully this is the first of many moving forward. What do you think, Zach?
Well, we'll have to see what happens because, again, these tires aren't quite up to the temperature that these drivers would ideally like them. Right now, they're single file back to about the 10th position before we get to our first side-by-side. Chris Elliott working the inside of the racetrack. He will get by the 15 of Sean Kerrigan. And then there's that number 8 car of Jeremy Jeffries that we saw at the back of the pack early on. He's going to work his way underneath that number 15 as well as he'll try to get that 10th position away.
I do want to point out that you notice that the top 6 are trying to get single file again to pull away. And just as I was about to say that, Robert Balcom and Brian Wolf start darting down, trying to make passes. And the more passing that this has created is actually helping Soup out a lot more because these guys back here are really laying it on thick with their tires. They're wearing their tires out, trying to get around each other on this bottom. They move Dante up. Dante's going to fall back a couple of spots now, the 3rd, the 4th. I mean, back here at the back, though, it looks like it's really single file for the most part. There's a battle between the 36 of Basalt and Jim Black. But, I mean, Otherwise, it's pretty much nice and clean all the way up until we get to the front area where you got the machine of Brian Wolf, Chris Emery, and Dante Ricky going side by side. So it looks like they're getting themselves settled nicely again, like they did the first run.
Two things that I noticed there on that restart, it's now I guess the tire temps have heated up enough these drivers feel comfortable to race, but I noticed that these drivers seemed rather anxious to get themselves single file, so that way they were able to wait till those tire temps kicked up. One thing I noticed Supka do from the race lead, when they came around after completing that first lap of the restart, he drove it so deep into turn 1 that it slid up almost to the 2.5 groove into the center of 1 and 2, which again would be a way to heat those tires up and get that grip sooner rather than later.
I mean, you can definitely heat those tires up, but you can also do a lot of tire wear doing that. Even though you are on cold tires and they're not up to temperature the way that they should be, this super abrasive surface that Atlanta Motor Speedway is notoriously well known for, that can eat up your tires real quick. And we saw the 11 car, he was off to a pretty good lead. He had about almost a quarter of a straightaway on the second place car, but that draft, Robert Balcom now all over his back bumper as we complete lap number 58.
We got a little bit of a battle back here. John Godfrey, Andre Rayo, Ron Luzier, Bob Dixon around this group back here from Richard Martin on back. They're sitting there going side by side, single file, side by side, single file, trying to get track position. But there's a big gap from Richard Martin all the way up to the position that Jeremy Jeffries is holding, which happens to be 11th place. So these guys are starting to really pull away from this field like we saw in that first run. So I don't know, what these guys have to do back here to get themselves sorted. As we see a lead change occurring right now with Robert Balcom going to the inside of Supta. I don't know if this is a wise move for Balcom. He's using a lot of his tires trying to get around the 11 machine.
Well, right now, the 17 of McClure offering his drafting help down the back straightaway as well, so he might have him clear before they get to 3.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, Seth, that right now the 18 with very little to worry about is it's the 11 that's stuck on that outside line without any sort of drafting help. Now, I think what we're going to see here is he's probably going to get shuffled back as that middle line hasn't quite picked up the way that we that middle line hasn't quite worked itself the way that we anticipated it would. Now, we see they arc that entry into turns number 1 and turn number 3, but by the time they get to the midpoint of turns number 2 and 4, Seth, those cars all over that white line on the bottom.
Battle going to be for the 5th position. Dante Ricky and Brian Wolf. The two of them nearly made some contact through 1 and 2 the last lap as Dante had a little bit of trouble hooking that inside line. Trying to hold off for that 5th position. Looks like he will succeed in doing so. And now Robert Balcom out in front showing the way, but Chuck McClure looks like he's going to put the pressure on that 018.
Emery, he's going to look under the 17. Looks like not quite sure what happened with McClure if he missed the corner entry, but he's going to lose 2, maybe even 3 positions by the time Dante Ricky gets around the inside of him into turns number 1 and 2.
35 of Frank Rivard had to check up a little bit after him and Brian Wolf were side by side a little bit trying to battle for position. That brought along the number 9 of Chris Elliott back into the picture, and now Elliott backs off and goes back single file. As it looks like Frank Rivard's trying to get something working on that high line on the entry, and then in the middle and the exit of the corner, he goes to the bottom. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you really think that would benefit you to try to start out the high side and try to dart it down like that? You mentioned that it would actually heat the tires up, but at this point, we've only got several laps already in. Is that worth actually trying to experiment with that right now?
Well, you're only about a halfway through the race right now, so if you're going to experiment with anything, now's the time to do it before it gets too late into the run. So right now, your top 9-10 cars running single file, your first side-by-side being between the 51 and the 8 of Jeffries off turn number 4.
Going to your point there as well, Jess, about Rivard taking that somewhat higher entry into the corner. If we go back to our first wreck when Andre Mahjong was hit from behind by Dave Melson. Those were 2 drivers with 2 different areas of lifting that wanted the same line of entry into the corner. If you're Frank Rivard and you're going up there to a groove that nobody is using going into the corner, you're able to attack the entry to the corner maybe a little bit more aggressively than you would be if you, and in this case, the 29 of Brian Wolf, are trying to enter in the exact same line.
coming up to put a lap down on the performance machine. Crivello is a little bit ahead of these guys as well. But going back to what you were saying, Seth, I mean, what I would be concerned about is someone going really low, barely touching that apron as a possibility, and then just pushing right up and hitting you and then hitting you into the wall. I mean, realistic damage. That's always got to play on someone. Oh, Frank almost got into the side of Brian Wolf there off of turn 4. But, I mean, if you push up, you know, a little bit of contact is not too bad, but you get enough contact into someone and hit that wall and keep going, that's going to hinder you long term.
Zach, you talked about last night running some laps here in the Winston Cup Series race, and one thing I'm noticing these drivers are utilizing a little bit here is the apron. There's not much of it, but the apron on the front straightaway, the crooked D-shaped front straightaway. Now, visibly, it looks like the car's rattling and Supka's coming to pit road. This is interesting because this is well outside of the window that we were expecting these drivers were going to be pitting.
I'm kind of curious if maybe he's doing a little bit of backwards math here, anticipating that this race might get a long green flag run. Not exactly sure what's going on with that, as his car should have been pretty much on par with the other leaders right now. So Robert Balcom, he will maintain that lead. The 17 of McClure, he's going to be about 3 car lengths back. And as you guys mentioned, the Rivard machine, oh, we've got a battle for second now. Emery going to work to the outside of the 17 of McClure.
Got a nice run there, and it's going to get to the right rear quarter panel, then alongside through 1 and 2. 17 pushes up just a tad, so if you're that outside line car, you got to be careful, because as you said, Jess, if that car on the inside gets out of shape, it's you that's between them and that outside wall.
Yeah, that's what I was going back. I mean, back to your point, having that high side, no one there, does play to your advantage, but at the same time, it can play to a disadvantage. All it takes is just one little hit on that apron, and just to push up. Supka now goes 1 lap down. Robbie Neisitz is 1 lap down as well at this point. I mean, these guys are going to pit shortly, and I saw Supka get all 4 tires and fuel, so he's going to be on a tear coming back. 3 wide here. Brian Wolf, Jeremy Jeffries, Frank Rivard now, Chris Elliott going into turn 3.
I think the 29 might be pitting because he was awfully low coming off of turn 2, and indeed he's coming down with our 2 race leaders. Balcom from the lead, McClure from second. Bob LaChance in the 51 joins them as well.
Green flag pit stops starting right away. It seems like, unless this is like diverse strategy, because you said, Zach, I thought you said, either you or Seth said that it's a bit too early for this, don't you think?
I mean, I would have thought that it might have been a bit too early, but, you know, with as hard as these guys are running their tires, they're wearing them down pretty quick. We are now over the halfway point of the race. Everybody has 4 tires stopped, so we know this is going to be stop number 2. They will have 2 more sets of tires left should they need them, so it may be just a little bit of timing concerning tire stops and then the tire allowance as well.
Chris Emery still leading at this point. Chris Elliott has moved into second, so really big shuffle up here. I mean, with the fact that Supka pit first, do you honestly think he's going to be gaining the advantage back, or do you think he finds himself in a hard place based on the fact that these other drivers came in together a couple laps later?
Well, the thing I'm looking at here real quickly is the lap time comparison between the fresh tires that Supka just took on and our race leader Chris Emery, and it just was now, when the 11 car was up to speed, he turned a 31.1 to Chris Emery's 31.9. So that's 0.8 of a second that he's been able to make up in that 1 lap alone.
Well, Seth, what I'm looking at is Balcom and that group when they came into pit versus where Supka is, because it looks like Supka's right there with Balcom now, but Supka's behind Balcom again.
And now we see Chris Emery diving onto pit road after the rest of the leaders. The number 9 of Elliott, looks like the 38 of Melson may be behind him. So once these guys come off pit road, we know that the 222 will have about a 5-lap advantage over the 11 car, about a 3-lap advantage over the 018. They're 2 dominant cars that we've seen so far tonight. So maybe a little bit of fuel strategy playing into the factor for when the 222 pits as well, so.
Still waiting for Richard Martin, Ronald Lucet, for them to come to pit road, as well as John Godfrey and Bob Seminara. It might be a couple of laps before we see the 712 on pit road, as I think under every caution he has come down and at least topped off the fuel tank. Right now we're watching what could potentially be the battle for the race lead as Supka puts the pressure on Robert Balcom, but right now that's a battle for around the 6th position.
Man, they came up on that 143 real quick in the middle of the back straightaway. Great driving by everyone for that not to be an incident, because I tell you what, Seth, that was the biggest incident that I never saw happen right there.
Absolutely. I'm not sure Bob Dixon realized they were double wide behind him, and he was trying to figure out where to go. Supka almost had to go to the apron to avoid him, and after all that, I'm not even sure the 11 lifted. He still took it 3 wide, and as a result, he is now moved in front of Robert Balcom, and after those drivers that do come to pit road finally hit pit lane, it will be the 11 cycling back to the race lead.
018 of Balcom, he is currently going to be running. So, and the 43 of Martin missed pit road, comes back out onto the racetrack. Not quite sure what happened there. Came out onto the racetrack, right into the path of the leaders before he dove it back down across the grass and onto pit road again. So, nearly a real big moment there off of turn 4.
There's your race leader in the 62.
Car spinning off turn number 2.
Yellow's out. Blown. Looks like it's blown motor. I think it's the 15 machine of Kerrigan, isn't it?
Oh, look how Robbie Nisus in the 54 nearly hitting him as Kerrigan's car stopped there on the inside of the second corner exit.
Such an unfortunate run for Kerrigan, too. Kerrigan was, he was minding himself pretty well this race, and he didn't have any issues or anything else, just really quietly meandering a little bit here and there, and I have no idea what happened. I'm looking back at this right now.
That car the engine just expired in the middle of turns number 1 and 2. Kerrigan did a masterful job keeping it as far down the racing surface as he could before spinning up at the racetrack, making contact with the rear end. So we're seeing a lot of more mechanical type issues than we're used to seeing here, Seth. We've got a number of cars that have dropped out early, presumably to losing gears in their car. Now, Sean Kerrigan, a car that hadn't been involved in any incident so far today, on lap number 74, engine just expires on him off turn number 2.
And I think we can chalk that up to possibly just one of those random engine explosions, because he was out in front of that 2-car tandem, so he wouldn't have been overheating to cause the engine to expire. So tough break there for Sean Kerrigan. But what that caution did, most of these drivers had already made their green flag pit stop with the exception of about 3 or 4. And if we had actually not had the caution come out, we would have ended up having maybe only a 5-car breakaway in the battle for the lead. Now this gives new life to everybody's 6th place on back.
Absolutely, but at the same point in time, so we got one more pit stop coming at least after we get back to green. So with that being said, Ronald Luzier, John Godfrey, Bob Seminara, Bob Dixon, Cy Jones, Crivello, Andre Cheris, Andre Rayoun, Tony Fox, most of these guys who really stayed out before that caution happened. I mean, they are really in good position, I would imagine.
Will be back to the point. Robert Balcom in 2nd. Those 2 drivers, along with Chris Emery, have been the only drivers that have led double-digit laps here tonight. And Supka, well, he's going down pit road now. And I kind of question this, because going back to what we saw happen with Josh Metallic when he gave up a 2nd-place restarting position, and now he finds himself in the garage area.
Zach, Dante just relayed to me that this is not just going to be a single file restart. This is also going to be an extended yellow. Can you tell the viewers and everyone else what that would mean regarding what Dante is saying about an extended yellow? Is that basically looking at the wave around cars, you think?
Absolutely, because there are such a high number of wave-around cars, Dante Ricky is going to be throwing an extended yellow. So essentially what's going to happen is we will see the lights go out on the pace car. They'll go out around the track. Pace car will duck into pit road. The leaders coming across the line will not accelerate. They will maintain pace speed to give the absorbent amount of wave around drivers we have, it looks to be about 13 or 14 wave arounds that they're going to have to do. So what that's going to do is that's going to give the owners and admins an opportunity to go ahead and clear the black flag of all of those wave around race cars. Now, I believe what we saw from the number 11 car was because he passed the leader under yellow, he was technically the first lucky dog. So what that gave him the opportunity to do, Seth, as we saw him dive down pit road, was come down, top off the gas tank. Now, despite the fact that he's going to have a few laps more worn tires, he now has that many more laps of fuel on the competitors, as we see like the 18, the 16, the 17. That could play a huge factor come toward the end of the race.
A great point, because I didn't actually realize that these guys that were battling from 4th position on back, they were running behind the top 3, who had all of them trapped 1 lap down.
Wait.
So certainly going to throw a bit of a monkey wrench into our restart order. I believe the 62 is still going to be our leader.
Actually, if you remember, Zach, it's 2 lucky dogs for this series. So Balcom is going to be in the same seat that the 11 of Soup that's in.
Yes, but Balcom did not come down to pit, and he now cannot come down to pit. So he lost out on that opportunity. So, Seth, as you mentioned, after the cycle, before we come back to green, that is going to put the 62, the 711, the 712, the 143, and the 56. That is Ronald Lucier, John Godfrey, Bob Seminara, Bob Dixon, and Jeff Crivello. Your top 5 coming back to this restart. Now, that's about the biggest shakeup in the standings that we've seen all day long.
Definitely is. Ronald Lucet, as well as the rest of those drivers you just named off, all playing pit strategy, banking on a caution coming out, and indeed it did. Now, all these drivers that are up ahead of these guys, Dante Ricky, Chuck McClure, Jeremy Jeffries, on back to Jim Black, they are currently 12th through 23rd, and we see that the lights are out here. I don't know if these drivers are actually going to be restarting ahead of the race leader in the 62 or not.
No, everybody behind the 62 will maintain pace speed. The cars in front of him all wave around, so they can now accelerate. They will get around to the backside of the pack. What that does is it alleviates the admins and directors from having to clear that many black flags. So these cars, they'll get single file. Those cars in front of the 62 will work their way back around to the tail of the field, and the race will officially restart once that 62 hits the start-finish line next time by. Again, it will be a single file restart, so that's why we see those cars all one by one. Seth, I want to do something here, and I want to say something. I would say it's a gamble, but it's not. Don't sleep on that 62 car of Ronald Lucier. I've run with him now the past season and a half, and on intermediate tracks, Ronald Lucier, he is a very, very good driver, and he has a really good opportunity now with some cars between himself and the 11 and the 018 to go out there and make a good run toward the end of this race. This track position could have very well played out for him very, very, very nicely.
Well, this has been a great year for him as well. A former winner this season at California and 4th in the point standings, 50 points back. And of course, this series runs off the classic NASCAR series. So, you know, if you rack up a couple more victories, that puts him right back up in the championship picture.
And I completely agree on that statement, because we've seen Ronald, and I'm not sure whether it was Monday night or the Tuesday night series. It could be also the Wednesday night series last season. He was the only one to really take it to Dante, if you remember that in the segment 2 series, the run that they had over there. And he actually was leading that whole segment for segment 2, Seth, if you recall that. So with that being said, Ronald knows how to be consistent as well. And going back to your point, he's 4th in points. He's going to be capitalizing pretty decently over his other competitors here. But also, if you look back here, Andre Cheris, who is going to apparently restart 7th here, I mean, he's 15 points back of Jack.
Oh, the leader's in trouble off of turn number 4.
He's coming back up the track as well. I think he's going to be able to keep it in the infield grass, but that was a close call. No caution, I don't see.
The yellow
Caution's
flag
out.
is out. The 62 car, I think that may be a case of cold tires there. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back and look at it. But the car just snapped left at the corner, the exit of turn number 4. I'm going to guess those cold tires just kind of did him in there, and a slide for life. Fortunately, nobody else involved coming into the first portion of the dogleg.
Boy, that really made me nervous when we saw the 62 starting to migrate back up the racetrack, because there were a lot of fast cars incoming as we watch it here. And this looks just eerily similar to what happened to Ronald Lucet on an earlier restart over in 1 and 2. Just no warning. The car comes around on him. And fortunately, when he got back into the throttle, it went down towards pit road rather than back up onto the racetrack. But the thing I was going to ask here, and now it's somewhat academic, was the case of guys like Supka, Robert Baucom. We know they've been up towards the front for most of this race. How great a sense of urgency were they going to have to get around some of these drivers that are up in the top 10 as a result of that yellow flag? Because some of them have been involved in some incidents here today. The 7-11 of Godfrey, the 33 of Tony Fox, the 56 of Crivello amongst those.
Well, it's funny that you should ask that, because as you look at pit road right now, Chuck McClure and company have come down to take on more fuel in their cars. So those guys obviously pretty confident that they can make their way back up through the field. Saw Robert Balka making a few pretty stout passes on that restart, but what it does is it gives the field a chance to once again bunch back up. But something that I want to point out, Seth, when we talked initially about these guys going to these single file restarts, kind of to our point, it doesn't seem to be the double file restarts that were causing the issues here.
Yes, I got a question for you here in terms of fuel strategy, because it is CTS physics. With those couple of drivers that just came down pit road, Dante Ricky, Chuck McClure, as well as Jeremy Jeffries, if 36 laps is indeed about the furthest these drivers can go, if we were to go green now, that would put them at lap 120. Is it possible for these drivers to save about 10 laps of fuel, especially if we get a couple more yellow flags from here to the checkered flag?
No. I'm telling you right now, it would be probably a half a can. Half can to a full can. They would still have to come in the pit. I mean, they could probably come in and top off after a few laps of running, probably about like maybe 15 laps, 10 to 15 laps, come in and get a full tank and go back out, and then it's a really good possibility of getting to a splash. But at this point in time, I highly doubt that they can save 10 laps, even if we could get a couple more cautions. They would have to come in and pit and top it off.
Well, Ronald Lucet, who was out in front, had that spin. He is going to join 6 other drivers back in the garage area, and why that is important is the fact, as we just mentioned, when he led us back to green, this is a driver that came in 4th in the point standings, and at a time in the season where you need those good finishes to remain in championship competition, one bad race like tonight could actually eliminate you from competing for that title.
He will have to brush his shoulders off and try to pick it up again next week. Obviously, that's going to be a loss in points, but not insurmountable. As you mentioned, Seth, he already has 1 win on the season. Would not be surprised to see him go out there and be able to get another one. So hopefully he can get himself back up and going here and just brush off tonight's bad luck. But right now we are crossing the line to put lap number 85 on the board. Now, as you asked, Jess, could they hypothetically save 10 laps of fuel? I think that you might be able to actually do it. If we have another, quick yellows, and, we have these restarts that we've been seeing as a result of these cold tire incidents, I think you could potentially put yourself in a window, because the other thing that you could do, the longer that you have to run on these tires, the more you have to lift out of the throttle. There are other ways that crafty drivers know how to save gas going into and through these corners. So I'd keep an eye out on those cars up front and see if, those cars run in and set maybe just a little bit differently than we've seen the majority of the race so far.
Well, I'm still banking on a half of a can. That's the thought that I'm going with, is if we have a couple more cautions, they would still have to come in for a half a can to a splash. That's where my mindset is regarding everything. If we have multiple cautions, Now, if we go from here to a green flag run and have possibly one caution, that would change the whole game plan. But if we go green flag up to the end, which is, there is that chance that we might end up having that, which I'm hoping we do have that as we get ready to go back to green starting lap 87 here. You never know what's going to happen. So hopefully they get to a green flag run and keep going as we go back to green.
I got another strategy here then if it is the case that maybe they have to take on a half a can. I mean, let's say that you're one of those guys that just came down and topped off the fuel tank. Obviously, you wouldn't have to spend nearly as much time on pit road as the rest of your competitors. Do you think about maybe going with right side tires only, spend as little time on pit lane as possible to try and gain track position?
But then you also got to look at the fact if we have a late caution, so you also got to...
Bob Dixon's going to get hit by Tony Fox. He goes up the track into Crivello. Andre Charest collected as well, and there's several others scattering through turn 4.
Big incident in the middle of 3 and 4. A couple cars getting a little loose, washing up the track, and then coming back down. There were 4 cars that I saw for sure into the wall before cars started washing down. They came into the path of the number 35, a Rivard, who we also saw having a really good day today. So right now it seems to be a complete, and another car spinning off of turn number 2.
As I was saying, Crivello immediately retired right away after that incident. Like, there was nothing he could do to get back on going at that point. I mean, complete, utter chaos on that restart coming around to complete that first lap.
That other driver that spun off of turn 2 was the 43 of Richard Martin. Doesn't look like he hit anything, though, so he should be okay. We'll go back and see what happened, but these were a couple of drivers. The 33 of Tony Fox, who have not really had the opportunity to restart up inside of the top 5 today, and with the timing of that caution, maybe feeling the pressure of those fresher tires behind them and those faster machines might have led to the contact we saw here going into turn 3.
Yeah, it looked like Balcom had gotten himself to the inside of the 56, but the initial contact started with the 33 into the rear end of the 143 of Dixon. It looked like Dixon may have just lifted just a little bit more than what Fox had anticipated, and that set off the entire calamity. Cy Jones involved, the 35 of Rivard, as we had mentioned, the 29 of Wolf. The 51 of Bob LaChance looks like he may have just narrowly avoided contact.
I think the 29 of Brian Wolf may have had a bit of contact as well. And then we're going to look here what happened to Richard Martin. And this was after the leaders had taken the caution flag. And it's like when he went into turn 1, that car just did not turn, drifts up the track into the outside wall.
Yeah, really strange. So maybe he might have dumped out of the throttle to woe it up coming off too as he joined up with the rest of the leaders. Might have snapped it around that way as well. Looked like he just narrowly, as you mentioned, avoided contact with that inside wall. But we're going to be putting lap number 90 on the board, Seth. I don't think we've had more than 10 or 15 laps of green since about lap 26 of this race. So as we mentioned before, fuel strategy on the back of these drivers' minds. We've just got 40 laps to go next time by. I don't know.
I can tell you, Bow coming on back came in. Cy Jones is in right now. Tony Fox is in. There's a couple other people who came in that I can't score around to. But based on what I'm thinking, mathematical wise, if they can hit 97 on 98. Then, they're within that fuel window of 32 to 35 for that fuel window, like Dante suggested, with having a full tank that they can go the distance. So, and Brian Wolf is clutching a little bit during this caution. So, I mean, I'm looking at probably 97, 98 being the magic mark at that point.
Well, Bob Seminara, he's made the most trips to pit road, along with Tony Fox. 13 times he's been to pit lane in this race. Obviously, most of them to top off the fuel tank, since there is a limited number of tires. And you see the 42 of Orlando LeBoy, he's actually going to get his lap back here, being the free pass machine. So all drivers, all 23 that are running, will be on the lead lap when we go back green flag racing. But Still the top two, not drivers that we've seen up front most of this race, in Bob Seminara and John Godfrey. Interesting, you got now the 222 of Chris Emery, who's in the third position. And remember, he was really one of the drivers that gave Supka a run for his money at the initial drop of the green flag earlier on tonight.
Well, and on the last restart that we had, Emery with a really aggressive move going to the inside of the 11, making it 3 wide into turn number 1. He was able to make up 2 positions that way. So being really aggressive on these restarts, paying dividends for him at the moment. However, you know, got to be careful, got to try to take care of that car and try not to upset your competitors out there too much. I don't think he's done anything, any overly aggressive or anything like that, but he's definitely played it smart. The car leading the field right now, Seth, the 712. We're used to seeing him up front on Thursday nights, but old Seminara having himself quite a good run here tonight on Wednesday.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. Bob Seminara, not really a driver that we're used to seeing run towards the front at the 1.5-mile tracks, but having a great performance here tonight. But we're going to get to now see what that car is able to do out in clean air, as he spent most of the time this race back in traffic.
I do want to rack your brains real quick. Are we racing to the possibility of a caution coming out at the end of this race, or are we racing to the end of this race? What are you guys thinking?
Well,
You think these guys are thinking, oh, well, we got to get to this specific mark now, or are we racing to that mark?
Well, believe it or not, we still have 40 laps. It's going to be 39, make that, as we take the green flag. They've got to make it through a whole lot more laps than that before they can think about the end of the race. Emery, with that really strong move to the inside of Godfrey, he's going to get on the back end of the 712 off of turn number 2.
The 29 of Brian Wolf did not go on that restart and held up that whole group behind him. There's a big gap going. I'm not sure whether it's actually him getting a bad restart or if that's just the damage, because it looks like he's really, really far off pace here.
Well, he did get right side damage from that last incident over in 3 and 4, so that may have definitely affected him, as right now Seminara trying to get away from Chris Emery, who in turn is trying to get away from the 11 of Jeff Supka, leaving them to battle for 4th place on back. And as we talked about, some new faces up here. How about that 038 of Dave Melson? We haven't really talked about him since he got involved in the first caution of the day, the contact between him and Andre Marchand. He's
been quietly moving his way back up through the pack, as we see the number 16 of Dante Ricky make his way to the inside. Chris Elliott's going to be waking his way up to the back end of that 038 as well. But Melson having a really stout run after troubles earlier in the day. Jeff Zupta was able to get around the 222 of Emery, and now we see Zupta running that middle line on the outside of the 712 of Seminara off of turn number 2.
Someone who has slowly and methodically been making their way back into this picture. Even though he's still far back there, he's running in 10th right now. He just got around Richard Martin last lap. So yeah, number 8 of Jeremy Jeffrey. So he may be one to watch before this race is over.
We've got a side-by-side up for the front for the lead here, Seth.
Yeah, that's going to be the 11 on the top side, the 712 on the inside. First time really tonight that we've seen Supka try that second groove, as he's been a bottom feeder for most of this race when he's been out in front. And look at the run he got through 1 and 2. He opened up 3 car lengths through turn 2 alone.
Absolutely. So right now, Emery all over the back end of that 712. It looks like the 222 might have the faster machine at this point, but with he's going to dive to the inside here in the middle of the quad oval.
Now, the one thing I got to wonder here with the move we just saw Supka make, I know that obviously he's got a slightly faster car and he's got slightly fresher tires than the 712 does, but with the power move we saw him make and the run he got off turn 2, is that something these drivers are going to be looking at, using that second groove as a viable option with a race win on the line in the later stages?
I have to mention this one more time. There was a big gap. Jeremy Jeffries passed him, got up there, top 10, passed Richard Martin to get the 10th position. There was a gap between that position and where Chris Elliott is right now. Jeremy Jeffries has closed that gap. He is right there with the pack, so he will be one I would imagine that we need to also pay attention to before this race is over, because he's really flying. I'm not sure whether he's pushing it too hard or not, Zach, but he's coming back up pretty fast.
Seth, to answer your question, yes, I think that is definitely something that you have to take notice of. When Zupta made that run on the outside of the racetrack, you now see the 222 of Emery. He's following suit. He took notice of that as well, and don't think the 16 of Dante Ricky is going to do any differently. These guys know, hey, if we can make a different groove work that we've not been able to make, the entire majority of the race up to this point, then hey, that's something to definitely remember at the end of the race, because there are definitely movers and shakers. And as you mentioned, Jess, yes, Jeffrey slowly making his way back up toward the front of the pack, as we figured that he would by the end of the race.
Now,
But
one thing
I'm wondering
here,
if Jeffries has used up a lot of his stuff, because now he's not able to close in on the 9 of Chris Elliott now. It's like I don't think that's Chris Elliott. Yeah, it is Chris Elliott. He's like maintaining the same gap. He'll close in just a slight bit, then he'll lose a little bit. So I'm wondering if he used up all of his stuff to get where he is right now. I mean, he's really pushing up off of turn 4 quite a bit.
well, yeah, let's speculate, because I was wondering the fact if we went to a long green flag run, more than likely these drivers were not going to be able to make it without coming to pit road. So I would assume that if indeed everybody's going to have to come down pit road at least one more time between now and the conclusion of this race, you can't be in tire conservation mode right now. You've got to set yourself up for that final pit stop.
Absolutely. I mean, Balcom's right behind Jeffries too. He's trying to close back up. A lot of these guys, I mean, they're trying to scratch and claw for the right track position when they come into pit if we have to have that. Well, I mean, what are you thinking, Zach? You think it's a 1.5 cam?
Do you really want to think? You really want to know what I'm thinking right now?
Yeah.
How many laps were there left to go when we took the green flag?
About 38, I believe. 38, 39.
And how many did we hear Dante Ricky say that these guys could make on a green flag run?
32, but I believe Terry said that they could go a max of 35 if you really want to try to save in that clutch mode.
If you really want to save and you really want to clutch, who's in any better position than that 8 and 018, just cruising at that back of the pack, watching those guys race real hard up ahead of them?
But they actually raced really hard to catch where they're at right now, from what I saw on that restart, because I was with Jeremy Jeffries when that restart happened.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. They cross the line this time by. There will be 28 laps remaining, so we have finally made it to the final 30 laps of this race, Seth. Right now, Supta still with a real comfortable run going there, and the 16 of Dante Ricky, he's gotten around for second. He's going to chase down the Zupta machine off too.
And if fuel strategy is in question, the one driver that wants to see that caution flag would be our race leader, because with it being the CTS physics, he is the one out in clean air, cutting the draft for Ricky, McClure, and others behind him.
Really quick update, Jack Dassault has just retired from the race, so that's going to give a huge advantage to this Challenger Series that's going on here with Andre Charest and Brian Wolf, Bob Dixon, the rest of them. I mean, Brian Wolf is 1 lap down at the moment. Andre Charest running 22nd at the moment, 1 lap down. But, I mean, Jack Dassault going down, 1 as well. I mean, that's going to throw a big wrench into that. Plus, you got the battle up there with Jack Dassault right behind Frank Rivard and Ron Luzier running in about 5th or 6th in those overall point standings as well. I mean, with him retiring, that's going to throw another wrench into it. But, Seth, another thing I want to bring up real quick. I just got told there is a specific driver, 19 laps of fuel, probably about 17 now, but 17 laps projected left.
So that would put anywhere from 6 to 8 laps short of making it to the finish. And so now the big question comes out. When do you make that final pit stop? Do you come to pit road now, where the fuel window would certainly be open to make it the rest of the way, run the risk of falling a lap down and a caution trapping you a lap down with maybe not even a possible hope of getting the lucky dog, or do you stretch that thing completely until it runs out?
Seth, I'm going to be completely honest with you, knowing that you could still get a late race yellow. I think you have to run right to the edge. I think you run it to the point where you can't run that right front tire anymore. Maybe you don't have to run your gas tank completely empty, but once you know that that right front tire is ready to give up the ghost from the run, the entirety of that green flag lap run that you've had, come on down. Get you some new right side tires, get you just a little bit of gas there, and you'll be ready to go the rest of the way.
Battles going on back here. Jeremy Jeffries just now getting around Chris Elliott. John Goffrey sliding back to 9th, as well as Jeffrey starts making his way up toward the 6th place machine of Dave Melson, slowly creeping methodically up there, taking his time, picking them off one by one, Seth.
I want to build off the statement you just made there, Zach, about the fact of waiting till as long as possible.
Emery almost got clobbered by the 038 of Melson coming off of turn number 4. Jeremy Jeffrey's going to take advantage of that. Sorry about that, Seth.
I was just going to quickly ask about, we ended up seeing when there were some green flag pit stops earlier, Jeff Supka was one of the first drivers on pit road, and with his fresh tires, it allowed him to actually get around then race leader Robert Balcom for track position. So if these drivers are indeed going to be making that final pit stop near the closing stages, I would assume if you're guys like Dante, Ricky, Chuck McClure, you're going to want to make that pit stop 1 or 2 laps sooner than the 11.
Well,
Seminary just came in.
You would think that would be the case, Seth, but you also want to make sure that you don't strand yourself on an island and be the only car coming off of pit road by yourself. So I think it might be just a little bit of a matter of, hey, let's pay attention to what the guys around us are doing as well, because last time by, I saw the 018 of Balcom come in. I didn't see anybody come in with him, though, and that could spell big trouble here in the next, 5-10 laps maybe.
Just alluded to, we saw Seminara on pit road. Jim Black was also on pit road, but looks like he had to come back around, possibly to serve a penalty. So tough break there for the driver of the 86, who was on the lead lap before he came to pit road. And that 29 of Brian Wolf, he is still out there, currently 2 laps down, but he's a bit of a moving chicane right now because the speed that he's carrying in relation to the drivers around him, astronomical.
Did you see that? Did you see that move between Jeremy Jeffries when he ran up on Brian Wolf? Wow.
Yep,
Chuck McClure's in the 17. That's 3rd place.
That's 3rd place right now. The only cars remaining out on the racetrack at this time that haven't come into pit, the 11, the 16 of Ricky, the number 8 of Jeffries. In 4th position, you've got Dave Melson. Chris Elliott has also not come in yet. And then you go all the way back to Robert Balcom, who's just now coming into turns number 3 and coming off of 4. Now, I may have been mistaken when I said that Balcom came into pit before. I believe that may have been another competitor, but right now, Balcom well off the pace. Not sure if he's trying to clutch it to make that car to the end without a pit stop or not, but he's not even hitting 170 at the end of the straightaways, which you should be able to easily do by yourself.
Yeah, race leader hit 176 right there, did Jeff Supka, so obviously that 018 very much so in fuel-saving mode, and it's interesting that Balcom would go with a strategy like that because he comes into this race as the points leader. I would think that if you're the points leader, you're going to be a lot more conventional than try and have an outside-the-box strategy, which could end up losing you valuable points and valuable positions in the closing stages of this race.
Well, what I'm kind of curious to see, Seth, is if maybe Balcom's just trying to do an opposite of what the 16 of Ricky is doing, because we know himself and Ricky. And right now, Zupta and Ricky, they will peel off of turn number 4 to come into the pits.
And turn the race lead over to the 8 of Jeremy Jeffries, who, if I'm not mistaken, was a driver that came down pit road 2 cautions ago to top off the fuel tank, but doesn't really look like at the moment that 8 car is in fuel-saving mode.
Andre Rayum in the 63, he's starting to slow down to come down pit road 2. I don't know who else is left that needs to come down to pit besides the top 2. I mean, do you... I don't know if Robert actually came in or not now.
Looking like Robert has been down pit road a total of 3 times, but I don't think he has pit under this run.
Nelson's out and away, leaving pit road now.
There's the 11 and the 16 leaving pit road together, and you talked about this, Zach, that if you're going to come down pit road and leave, you want to leave with a buddy, just based off the CTS physics. You want to be able to utilize that draft.
Yep, absolutely, and that's exactly what we see happening right now. So as you see, the number 11 car, he is still behind that 18. So what that does is that is now going to unlap those guys. Balcom's still out there on the racetrack, and the 11, or my mistake, it's still the 11 of Zupta. They're still trying to get caught back up to those leaders, because we know It's the 8 of Jeffries. He is now coming off of turn number 4. We're going to have to see if he's got enough, but, you know, as it stands right now, there's no way the 11 and the 16 catch the 8 car, but is the 8 car going to have to pit being the key question here? I'm not sure if anybody can make it.
Out of curiosity, the caution window is what, Seth, when it comes to a car that's multiple laps down at this point? Would it be 126, 127?
I would assume it'd be the completion of 126. Anywhere past that point prior to the white flag, a caution would end this race, because obviously with all these drivers coming down pit road, we've got multiple drivers that are one lap down.
Yeah,
add
but
in
I'm
that extra
looking
lap
at Brian,
of caution.
but Brian Wolf and Jim Black are multiple laps on with Andre Rayom and Bob Dixon. That's what I was just wondering, because this is an intermediate track, not a super speedway.
I think even if it's multiple laps down or 1 lap down, I think it just adds that 1 extra lap of caution. So I don't think that having those other drivers multiple laps down is going to play a factor into adding yet another lap of yellow if we do get a late race caution.
Well, I was looking at the extended yellow as the possibility for wave rounds.
I'm not sure if they would do that towards the end of the race.
Seth, right now, the Jeremy Jeffries machine, I don't think he is conserving anything as he works his way through turns number 1 and 2. I'm watching his speed at the end of the straightaways, and that time by heading off into turn 1, he was up to 178 miles an hour. So it's got me wondering if Jeffries is banking on a quick yellow here toward the end of the race, because here he comes off 4.
His lap times were running about consistent with what drivers were on the last green flag run in the 31.8s. On the other side of that coin, though, for Robert Balcom, that last time by, he ran almost a 33 flat. So he is definitely in fuel conservation mode. Right now, we're going to have to focus on the gap between himself and Jeff Supka, who now will inherit the 2nd position. That last time by, it was 24 seconds between Balcom and Supka. I'm not necessarily certain that Robert Balcom's going to be able to manage that gap for these final 11 laps.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got about a half a track lead, but with the speed differential that these cars are running, Jeff Zupta just now coming off of turn number 2, your leader Balcom coming across the start-finish line. So I guess he's got a little bit more than a half a track advantage at this point, but is it going to be enough time? In the middle of the corner right now, I see Balcom all the way down to 153 miles per hour on the telemetry, so he is lifting tremendously.
I think he might be pitting. He just took it really low there out of turn 2, runs down on the low side of 3 and 4.
Yep, he's slowing down. He's coming in.
Yep, he's coming down. So that strategy did not work for Robert Balcom. That's going to turn the race lead over to Jeff Supka, who's got about 3 car lengths in hand back to Dante Ricky and Chuck McClure, but those two are lined up. Could those 2 cars generate enough speed to get up to the bumper of the 11?
Well, we saw Dante come off pit road with Supta, so I think that Supta and Ricky are both on the same plan. But I mean, McClure's the one who's throwing a big wrench into this. I mean, he's right there. All it takes is one little ball. But I'm just curious here, Seth, if that draft is actually going to play a key or not, because I just don't know if the draft would be more effective compared to the tires going in these corners or not.
Well, we ended up having that move earlier on when Chris Emery got a run on a driver and jumped out to the right rear quarter panel, but that's really been the only time I've seen up here at the front a driver be able to utilize the run in the draft on one of these straightaways to generate a move into either 1 or 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, we haven't really talked about the draft coming into play on that high side at all to make the move, and if Supta is aware of what's going on behind him, all he's got to focus about is Ricky. But Ricky's trying to not only get Supta, but he's also trying to make sure he doesn't lose a position to McClure. So, I mean, what do you do at this point? Do you just say, okay, well, I'm just going to do my best and see where I finish, or are you actually going to really be aggressive and actually try it? And, you know, I mean, you can't really do much with that high side because we saw Emery earlier not really be able to do much with it. He got there, but he couldn't do much with it.
As it stands right now, coming off of turn number 4, that 16 car has broken away from the 17 of McClure in third position. Ricky now running about a couple car lengths back from the 11 machine of Zupta. He looks low down into turn number 1, but can't get enough of a run. Zupta will come down and defend that off of turn number 2. 3 car lengths now of Zupta's advantage down the back straightaway.
Did we talk about this a little earlier, Seth? About memorial races, tribute races, and look who's running second right now.
Well, I want to throw out a little bit of a statistic as well. Obviously, we know the fact that Dante Ricky running the tribute scheme here tonight for Ed Bauman in the Ed Bauman Memorial Race. But if you look at our top 5, Supka, Ricky, McClure, Emery, and Jeffries, 4 of those top 5 have been to victory lane this season. The only one that hasn't, second place driver of Dante Ricky.
You know, Ricky would really like to bring that car into victory lane for the Ed Bauman Memorial tonight. Ghostbusters machine number 16. He's going to drift up the track just a little bit off of 4. Got awful close to those lap cars, and I think that's going to give Zupta a chance to gap Ricky with 4 to go here down into turn number 1.
Not sure if he was trying to maybe get the draft off of those cars in the outside line, but it looked like it hindered him more than it helped him. Although, if you think about it, maybe if he's got a little bit further of a gap back there like he does right now, it may allow him to generate a little bit better of a run if he can get back to the 11. And we just had an exchange for third place. Jeremy Jeffries got around Chuck McClure. Don't look now, that 8 car could have something about this, say about this win, because he's less than a second back.
He's less than a second back, but he's only got 3 laps to get past 2 cars. The length between the 16 and 8, you know, all of about 11 car lengths now coming off of turn number 2. Dante Ricky not able at this moment to make any time on the Zupta machine, and the 8 of Jeffries not making any time on the 16 into turn 3.
Zach, I've noticed when I was Zupta, when he goes into 1, he barely touches that white line. Dante's running a little bit higher up. What does that do for the driver going in from the middle to the exit?
Well, I think at this point it's all entirely personal preferences. We saw the 42 of LeBoy in front of the 11 car, blocking the 11 car's entrance, but in doing so, the 42 is also going to hinder the exit of the 16 car, giving the 11 a little bit more of an advantage coming through 3 and 4, coming off of 4, this time by the Zupta machine, will be receiving the white flag from the flagger. 1 more lap to go as Ricky falls just a little bit farther back off the 11's bumper.
Last time that Supka went to victory lane was back race number 5 at the road course of Watkins Glen. He started from the pole tonight. He's led 74 laps. Dante Ricky trying to close the gap through 1 and 2 to make it a fight to deny Supka his 3rd win of the season. He's going to have to drive it deep into this corner, but I don't know if the tires will stick.
And it doesn't look like Ricky's going to be able to generate that run. So Ricky all the way down on the bottom of the racetrack, but off of turn number 4, Jeff Zupta picking up win number 3 on the season, with Ricky a close 2nd place in that Ed Bauman number 16.
Jeremy Jeffries, last week's winner, will bring it home 3rd, McClure in 4th, and Chris Emery in 5th. And then some of the guys that caught a break with the caution: 6th for Seminara, 7th for Dave Melson, and 8th for John Godfrey. Is this Atlanta race a little bit of everything here tonight? Long green flag runs, some short spurts with some cautions intermingled, and then a long green flag run to the end. And Jeff Supka coast to coast here tonight in the Ed Bauman Memorial Race.
Ricky giving that Ed Bauman tribute car a great run. Unfortunately, just not quite enough as that number 11 of Zupta, the dominant car all night long. Not sure exactly, Seth, you might have the statistics on that, but that 11 car out front for, I would say, easily about half of this race from start to finish.
76 laps officially there for Jeff Supka. The next closest to him was Robert Balcom, and he only led 13 laps. So no doubt we can easily put the title of dominant on the performance that Jeff Supka had here tonight.
12 drivers finished on the lead lap. The 11 of Jeff Supka, the official winner. Dante Ricky in the 16. 8 of Jeremy Jeffries. Chuck McClure in the 17 and Chris Emery in the 222 comes home 5th. 6th, Bob Seminara, 7th. Dave Melson in the 038. 7-11 of John Godfrey comes home 8th. 9th is Chris Elliott, 10th. The 35 of Frank Rivard. 11th, Bob LaChance, and the last car on the lead lap was a 018 of Robert Balcom's side.
And that's going to be interesting too, because we talked about the fact that Balcom came into this race the points leader, 28 points over Dante Ricky, 43 over Jeremy Jeffries. While Balcom still finished on the lead lap, his two competitors finished up inside of the podium. So it may be a really close battle for these drivers heading into next week at Pikes Peak.
And I've heard Zach and you talk over there on the Tally Challenge series that runs on Thursday from time to time as well. You guys mentioned, I believe it was last week, hey, you got into an accident, you're off pace, but you need to stay on track to gain as many possible positions as possible because other people may fall out. Andre Cheris did that. Brian Wolf did that. I mean, look at everyone else who fell off and fell out of the race. I mean, great job for them sticking it out and trying to gain a little bit of more positions and points.
Cheris will definitely be making it a fight with him, picking up a couple of spots between himself, Dassault, and Wolf for the Challenger Series heading next week as well. So no doubt about it, Atlanta kind of throwing these drivers a curveball, but at the end of the night, it looks like the point stands in both series, the overall and the Challenger Series, may be tightening up heading into another tire killer in Pikes Peak next week.
Well, remember last season we it came down to the nitty gritty. Doug, Katie, and Glenn Harris. Remember that at the very end. I mean, we could see this starting to develop a little bit more and more and more, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see this happen again, Seth.
Let's see if we can talk with some of our top three finishers here tonight. And how about we start with the guy that maybe had the fastest car in that final run, brings it home third place, Jeremy Jeffries. Hey, Jeremy, it's Zach, Jess, and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Hey, how are you all doing?
We're doing good. Man, we saw that your car, it just didn't seem like early on in the race that it fired off all that well. Have to wonder if there was some strategy playing in there, because we were fully expecting with the momentum of winning last week that we were going to be seeing you to start this race up inside of the top 10. So was this kind of remain conservative from the get-go, or were you struggling with a couple of aspects of the track?
I was just trying to save my tires. I was going to let everybody else go, let them race, and then get them at the end. It just unfortunate caution there got me where I didn't need to be, and it was really hard to recover.
Jeremy, we saw that, as you just mentioned, that track position playing, so much of a factor. Now, we saw a lot of issues on the restarts of the race, which inevitably brought us down to single file restarts. From what you were noticing, do you think it was an issue of the cars being side by side, or more of an issue of guys just not being able to get hooked up into the track the way that they wanted to?
I think it was mostly the tires, the cold tires on the restarts, because I think I caused the second caution. I stayed out on older tires. They were really cold. I went into turn one, and that thing just tried to come around on me, and I was trying to save it, and unfortunately I got into Cyber, and I think somebody got into him. And yeah, it was definitely just hard to get any grip right there at the beginning of a run. You needed 2 or 3 laps.
All right, so Jeremy, let's fast forward to the end of this race. It was looking like in those final 5, maybe even 10 laps, you had one of the fastest cars on the racetrack, fought your way up there into the podium. If you had had a couple more laps, do you think you could have gotten up there with the 16 and the 11? And if so, was there an area where you had planned that you could make your move on them to maybe win this race?
No, I wasn't catching them. I took 2 tires on that last stop. I was trying to play the caution strategy, hoping I'd get one after everybody pitted. I could stay out maybe a little longer, and then I knew I was losing too much time. I had to try 2 tires, and it got me up to third. But those 4 tires were still better up there at front.
Well, Jeremy, congratulations on a great performance here tonight. Obviously, this is going to continue to have you in the conversation for that championship as well. The momentum clearly in your corner in the last couple of weeks. So congratulations on that. We're now going to give the opportunity for some thank you, sponsors, and shout outs.
Just first off, to Terry and Tom and the rest of Ed's family, it was just an honor to be in this race. It was terrible how it started out, but it came down to a good race at the end, and I'm glad they got a good show. So just this Memorial race was fantastic, and just want to say thoughts with the family today, and I know they're missing him. I didn't ever get to meet him or know him, but I heard he was a great guy. So that's just yeah. And the rest of the owners, Prime, Bones, Terry, of course, and the admins, the drivers, FRN, my teammates at XFM. Just thank everybody that allows me to come here and race every week and keeps it enjoyable.
It's Jeremy Jeffries, P3 here tonight at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Once again, congratulations there, Jeremy, and a terrific performance here tonight.
Thank you.
And now let's get our second place finisher, Dante Ricky. Hey, Dante, it's Zach, Jess, and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yep, I got you.
Well, man, first off, congratulations on putting that number 16 tribute car up inside of the podium, second place here tonight. But obviously, we know that you would have loved to have put that car in victory lane. Not only that, we were talking about you being the only driver in the top 5 in those closing stages that hadn't found victory lane. So how difficult is it to not overdrive that race car, knowing that the 11 is right there within striking distance, to keep that thing underneath you, but knowing that that brass ring of winning this race is right there?
It was an amazing race tonight once we finally got going. It did take a little bit of a while to actually get to this point, but my goodness, I just want to say it was an honor to be able to drive Ed's race car tonight in honor of him. And I'll tell you what, it was close there at the end, but the pit strategy was very key. I fortunately was able to get into pit road at times where I could take 4 tires and put fuel in. I didn't have to make any fuel-only stops, and I did get caught as the first wave around on a caution, which was close to the single file restarts, just based on the way the race went. There were a lot of wave arounds when the single file restarts began. So at that point in time, being 15th in line, 20th in line, you have to be extremely patient not to try to be Superman going into turn 1. You simply wait a lap or 2 for the tires to warm up, then make your moves to the inside or outside, depending on the situation. And you're very patient all throughout. There were cars that, when I got up to the top 5, it was really fun to race with Bob Seminara and Chuck McClure and Jeremy and Chris Emery. And Jeff Supta was right there. And he and I were pretty much, he was first, I was second for a few laps. Then the pit stops began. And we decided, let's take it to pit road now and no mistakes. And just keeping that last pit stop mistake free and getting out of there clean. And a little bit of luck with catching a lap cars at positive times allowed me to drive Ghost car to a second place finish. And I'm really proud of that tonight.
Now, Dante, you did mention you got to drive that Ghostbusters number 16, a car that a lot of the older RTG and RTR members are used to seeing. Now, I ran with Ed quite a bit, and I know he would be very proud at the run that you gave that car tonight. What more do you think it would have taken to catch Zupta there? He seemed to have the, overall most dominant car all night long.
Well, we came out of the pits after the final lap 114 pit stop at a time where I really couldn't make a move on him because there was a very intense race with the lead lap cars of Chuck McClure and Chris Emery on the racetrack, also catching up to Bob Seminara and a few others who were on the racetrack. And Jeff had an amazing run tonight, an amazing pit stop for him. We got in there mistake free, and the strategy calls that he made were perfect. The time I would have had to make that move would have been around lap 115 to 120, and it would have been extremely difficult to make it in those circumstances because we were catching slower cars that had more worn tires. I would have had to have gotten to him before he started to beat the lap cars and the race leaders that I just mentioned that were right there. He got to them first, and that was the opportunity for him to succeed and take the race win. So I would have had to make the move much earlier, and by the time I was 5-4 to go, I pretty much wore my stuff out. But hey, I was in a good position there for second place, and very proud of that. Very proud tonight.
All right, so Dante, we've obviously entered into the second half of this season. There are no playoffs, and you're in a pretty good tight battle with the 018 of Robert Balcom. Tonight, you come out with a net gain over him, your second place to his 12th place. So obviously, I know you wanted to win, but does this give you some confidence heading down towards that championship weekend that, you may be able to take that points lead and hold on to it?
We are closing in on Robert a little bit, but it's still quite a distance, and I've got to stay focused here to continue to run the best I can. And we still have 6 races left, so a lot can happen in 6 races. I think we have Pikes Peak on the schedule, which is always a fun, exciting track. I've had a few good runs at Pikes Peak, as well as I believe we have races coming up at Iowa, Homestead, and Michigan to finish the season, which Iowa is a fun track that I'm not all too familiar with. So we have some interesting races, some that I've succeeded at before, and some that are relatively new racetracks to me. So I just have to stay focused, and I'm still going to stick to my logic that this Wednesday night series here at RTG, the driver who wins the championship, especially in this final 5 races of the season, is going to have either the most wins or the best average finish among that stretch. And that's what it's going to take to get the championship here if we're going to have a shot. But, it will be a challenge, and we have some work to do. Our work is cut out for us.
Well, once again, congratulations on a job well done there, Dante, in that Ghostbusters number 16 there in tribute for Ed Bauman. Great to see you up there. Obviously, we were pulling for you to try and pull off this victory. It would have been the icing on the cake, but still a great run for that car and a great run for yourself, given the point situation you had coming into tonight's race. Anybody that you'd like to shout out or thank you?
Big shout out to all of our drivers who race here at RTG and our RTR series, especially all of those who race on Tuesday night and Wednesday night for making the racing as exciting as it is. And yes, this was a tough race on the drivers tonight. Long distance, a lot of cautions, a lot of strategy. And big thank you to all of the drivers for coming out and making this so exciting in honor of Ed tonight and putting on such a great show. Also, big thank you to the RTG owners, especially Terry Bauman, for giving me the opportunity to drive Ed's car. And really, it's a special thing. And while I never personally got to know Ed or race against him, he was a great man. And while he will be missed, he definitely will not be forgotten by all of us here at RTG and RTR. Very special opportunity to drive the Ghostbuster car tonight. And a big thank you to my family, all of my friends watching, and just really exciting to be able to come home with another top 5 finish.
That's Dante Ricky. Brings it home P2 here tonight in the Ed Bauman Memorial Race here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Congratulations on a great run there, Dante. We just get the feeling it's not going to be long before we're going to find you in victory lane here in the Aero 88 series.
Thanks, Seth, Jessica, Zach. Thank you for a good broadcast tonight, and good win, Jeff.
And let's see if we can now go down to victory lane and talk with Jeff Supka. Hey, Jeff, it's Zach, Seth, and Jessica up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, gotcha.
Man, that car was dominant tonight. Started out in front, faded back a little bit, but not too far, and then up at the front when it counted. And at certain points, you just pulled away from the field. I mean, what were you able to find here at Atlanta Motor Speedway that some other drivers might have missed?
The key was it was a loose setup, and I love loose setups. So the harder you drove it, the right rear would stay hotter than the right front. And for the full first half of a run, my right rear would stay hotter than my right front, which is totally opposite of anything we've ever run before. So I was able to keep the right rear hot, which means on a long run, I could drive it harder and faster.
Jeff, I'm not gonna lie to you. You just broke my heart by telling me that, because it sounds like I would have really loved that setup. But as Seth mentioned, just the absolute dominant car there. Were you a little concerned at all on that stretch of yellow flags that we had, where we had a whole bunch of them in quick succession there? With as cold as your tires got there, were you a little bit concerned, because we saw the 16 of Ronald Lucier lose it off of turn 4, in the lead on those cold tires? Was that something that was lingering in the back of your mind as well?
Yeah, the tires dropped down cold. I think it was 85 degrees, which is nothing for these tires. It takes 5 laps to get the tires warm enough to where you could really get on it. It wasn't really worried about the tires as much. I was more worried about that long stretch in the beginning, because I went down to a half a tank of gas, but I was staying out to try to avoid all the carnage in the back.
Yeah, Jeff, obviously a great run for you here tonight, your third win of the season, but of course, everybody is gunning for that championship as well. You came into this race 10th in the point standings, but only 76 points back. And we know that wins gain you the maximum points week after week. There's still a little bit of season to go here, and you've been on quite a momentum streak as of late. So, what are your thoughts going down this home stretch in your attempts to get up there and try and be in the championship hunt when you guys get to the season finale at Michigan?
I'm really not in a points battle. I don't think too much, not mentality wise, because I've missed 2 races already. So that's hurt me a lot, and I just wrote off this season as just to try to get the wins. 76, that's not bad.
Jeff, a great performance for you here tonight. Congratulations on your third win of the season. You've now been able to win at 3 different track configurations, a road course, a shorter speedway, and now a 1.5 miles. So we look forward to seeing when we go to some other configurations if maybe you can win at those as well. But a rocket of a machine here tonight, leading 76 laps. Congratulations on Coast to Coast. We're now going to turn the microphone over to you for some sponsors, thank yous, and shout outs.
Well, first of all, I want to say this whole race and tonight was about Ed Bauman, and his family, Terry, and I guess his wife and his kids. It was all about him tonight. I was so happy to see Dante with his paint scheme behind me. He helped me a lot with the win, and yeah, it was nice to see Dante up there running that car. But yeah, tonight was all about Ed, and just want to thank Terry for organizing this race, and RTG for everything they do, and you guys at Flatout for the broadcast.
That's Jeff Zupka. He got to burn it down here tonight at Atlanta Motor Speedway, winning the Ed Bauman Memorial Race here in the Aero 88 series. Congratulations there, Jeff, on a dominant performance. Go enjoy that victory.
Thanks, guys.
And of course, we would be remiss if we did not also just as kind of build off of what Jeff's just said there. This race not only in tribute to Ed Bauman, but his family members as well. His wife, Crystal Castell Bauman, his stepdaughter, Kimberly Vardy, his mother, Ann Hart, his father, William Bauman, of course, his brothers, Terry and Tom, and his sister, Sherry. This race, obviously, tonight put on for you guys as well. And just, Zach, I mean, this was kind of what we expected in one sense, knowing how slick that the old surface of Atlanta was going to be. But once these guys got into those long green flag runs, it really kind of gave us the idea of who had the fast car and who had the best tire conservation strategy.
Well, it definitely ended up turning into an entertaining race, Seth. Once we got past all the struggles on the restarts of the race, we saw that it ended up putting together some really great racing. We made it to green flag pit stops a couple times. And at the end of the race, it was just that 11 car of Jeff Zubed and that 16 of Dante Ricky. They were the two really, really strong cars all night long. And being able to keep their cars clean and use the pit strategy to their advantage and saving enough fuel and not trying to save too much and losing too much ground, they really put it together. So aside from the mid-race issues that we ran into, I think this was a really, really great tribute race to the entire Bauman family, to everybody who knew Ed, to everybody who loved Ed so much. Just a really good time. And Seth, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and Jess, and I can't wait to do it again.
And to go on what you said, I agree. I mean, I'm sure, even though I wasn't here like you were, Zach, I didn't know Ed, unfortunately, like everyone else seems to have known him. But I'm sure that he would have loved the idea of the drivers going all out at the very end, pit strategy, a little bit of this and that, with you had random people up at the front that we didn't even see coming up at all, and then all of a sudden it's switching back and forth with pit strategy, playing out to be a very fantastic finish, fantastic final several, what was like the 23 laps that we had for a green flag run at the end of that. That was just so amazing to see them race the way they did, able to hold their own respectfully, carefully, and just go all out the way they did. It was just so great to see that. And to play on another thing that you were talking about, Seth, the family of Terry and Ed Bauman. I mean, think about this for a moment. A lot of people think it's just, okay, people like us, drivers coming in to, race, right? But believe it or not, the past few tribute races that we've done, we don't take the time to realize that there's a huge arsenal of everyone's family and relatives that are actually involved behind the scenes. This is a real big family community over here.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. And that's why usually these special memorial races have a little bit of an added that every driver in the field here tonight would not have been disappointed to see that 16 go to victory lane. And there were probably a lot of people watching here tonight that were pulling for that 16 to win as well. Dante almost pulling it off, and take nothing away there from Jeff Zupka. He had a strong machine here tonight, but it's kind of hard not to back somebody when there's something like that going on, where there's a tribute race and there's a car out there in relation to who that person is being having that tribute to.
And Seth, I do appreciate being involved and included in this tribute race tonight. And Zach, I really do appreciate being involved with you. I honestly would love to see what we could do on a plate track together with us three commentating.
Definitely would be interesting, no doubt about that. It was a great night, guys. I appreciate the both of you joining me in the booth here this evening as well, as we get set to head down the home stretch. 6 races remain here in the Aero 88 series, and based off the calculations right now, it's looking like it's going to be a very tight points battle when they head to Pikes Peak next week. But once again, thanks to Jess and Zach for joining me here tonight for the Ed Bauman Memorial Race for the RTR Aero 88 series. Thank you to everybody for joining us here this evening. Hope you enjoyed our coverage. Tomorrow night, we continue on the Tally Challenge. It's the penultimate race of the regular season to set up the playoffs. Zach and I'll be in the booth to continue on that season for you all as we get ready to close.
I'm not sure if I'm going to race or not. Just throwing that out there now.
We shall see, and that will be, I believe, closing out our broadcast for this week. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in here tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage. We'll see you guys tomorrow night for the Tally Challenges. You've been watching another production of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.